I want to start with the show that has the entire planet talking. And one, let's face it, you've probably seen yourself or at least seen the memes in Netflix's Baby Reindeer. And for those living under a rock, in Baby Reindeer, basically, Richard Gadd, who is a comedian turned writer, stars and writes a miniseries that tells the largely true story of his experience being stalked while working as a barman and struggling comedian in London. And what's resonating for many here is that this narrative doesn't follow the usual kind of evil stalker narrative and instead approaches Martha, who obsesses over him, with a level of sympathy and empathy, while God also holds himself really accountable for much of what happened here. The kind of first hand lived in experience gives the humor and the reflections a really biting honesty. And as soon as you meet Richard and Martha, the show grips you by the balls and then kind of rubs them awkwardly from the word go. It's super specific in its observations in a way real life can only give you. With blinking, you miss the details, like the first time that you realize Martha's already iconic sent from my iPhone sign off to her many emails is misspelled. And you're like, why is that? Oh, wait, why? Why did she do that? Or how she doesn't spell the word good correctly, but can spell cunnilingus perfectly. And Netflix is the perfect platform for this, both from how the show benefits from kind of glitzy sensationalism in the same way many of its famous documentaries have, to how the drama of the show has now spilled out into the real world, with many online detectives trying to hunt down many of the characters of the show, despite the makers saying, please don't do this. And it is an unfortunate side to it because, again, like if you watch the show and if you got the show, you kind of do see Martha as a troubled individual. So for what she has done, again, I get people's need to have justice and stuff like that, but like also let's just leave this unwell person alone and let's just enjoy the show. The show itself, though, to kind of focus in on that, is also ridiculously bingeable. At 7 episodes, with all but one extended episode in the middle that explores how Gad became so primed to be a victim and unknowingly play into this level of stalking. All the other episodes come in around the half-hour mark. I absolutely devoured it in 2 sittings, and I would have done it in one, only that it was late and I needed to get some sleep. And I almost feel bad saying this, but it's a compliment to her performance that Jessica Gunning is maybe one of the best casting decisions I've seen this year as Martha. She instantly embodies the character and had me knowingly cringing with just facial expressions, thinking of people that I've known throughout the years that she reminded me of. And that's kind of the series' charm. You feel like you know these characters, so when someone takes a wrong step, you instantly know what's going to happen and you can't look away. For his part, Gad is a really engaging and flawed lead role who plays and scripts it with brutal, unflinching honesty that has you sometimes shouting at the screen when you see him make a decision you know will make the entire situation 10 times worse. It's so honest that I honestly found it hard not to victim blame at certain points, and Gad never tries to portray himself as an innocent bystander or play victim here. He admirably owns everything in a really refreshingly honest and reflective take that we just don't see on television much these days. But what makes it really remarkable, and for me, probably actually not only just a good bit of Netflix content, but one of my favorite TV series of the year, is that it doesn't just rest on the tabloid sensationalism of it all, and it works on a real emotional level. We have one scene, for example, with Gad talking to his parents, and it had me in floods of tears with no warning. For example, I wasn't expecting to cry watching this show, but yet they got me there. And it remains gripping right until the very last second. Even after all of the kind of main loose ends seem to be wrapped up and we seem to be approaching happily ever after here, Gad continues to zig and push the self destruct button right until the disarmingly poignant ending. If you haven't already, get in on the global conversation and watch Baby Reindeer immediately. On to another of my favorite shows of the year. And when we do our 2024 on the box top 10 shows of the year, one that will definitely be in or around top spot is Shogun. Recently finished up its apparent miniseries run on Disney Plus. And I've discussed this show already, but I had to come back as the show absolutely stuck the landing in a way that has people begging showrunners Rachel Kondo and Justin Marks to bring it back for a second series, despite them coming to a really satisfying ending in the source material of James Clavell's 1975 novel. For those who don't know, Shogun is set in the 17th century Japan amid a kind of power vacuum following the death of a previous ruler, as we learn about the world of the samurai through the eyes of English sailor John Blackthorne, as transcribed to him by his translator and potential love interest, Mariko, while they follow rebel daimyo, I hope I said that right, Lord Toranaga. Last time I discussed it, I used the natural comparison that everyone's making because it just works of Game of Thrones. And this show is the first show I've watched, including House of the Dragon, the Game of Thrones spin-off, by the way, which has really filled that Game of Thrones void for me since the kind of flat ending of the HBO epic. And for the record, I loved House of the Dragon. Literally last night, I read all of Fire and Blood up until the end of series one of House of Dragon. So this isn't a criticism of that show, but what worked for me here is the writing and how they use the world and devices like Japanese customs to deliver moments without actually needing to do anything. Like, give me Mariko apologizing for forgetting her manners while being sent to punk out Ishido ahead of, say, Daemon beheading Vaemond in House of the Dragon for calling Rhaenyra a whore any day. It's the little things and how they just let you sit in the tension of the moment, and how confident they are with it. And it's a show that, despite trying to fit a 1,200-page novel into just 10 episodes, is really comfortable using soft strokes and taking its time. And like I said, it's so confident in how it fleshes out the world and tells the story. You're just permanently primed and dreading bad things happening, that when they do, they feel totally earned and devastating. This means, though, that to execute that, the acting must be really on point, and they absolutely nail the casting here. You have Anna Sawai's presence and poise as Mariko. She's so resolute that when she betrays even the kind of slightest emotion, it cuts deeply. But that's then contrasted by the hilarious kind of swagger and charisma of Jarvis Cosmos Blackthorne, and my personal favorite in the kind of perennial survivor, Yabushka, who's played by Tabunobu Asano. And then you've got Hiroyuki Sanada's Toranaga, who I heard brilliantly described as Ned Stark meets Tywin Lannister, who's almost unbearably good at keeping his cards close to his chest. And what all this results in is one of the most effective penultimate episodes I've ever seen, which I won't obviously get into plot-wise if you haven't seen it, but is up there with the Red Wedding for me. The finale may upset some because instead of going kind of full balls to the wall with a Battle of the Bastards style epic battle, as you feel the entire series is kind of setting up for, it instead decides to go left and focus on conversations and wrapping up our characters' arcs perfectly. And I loved it personally. I thought they did it fantastically. I'm a big kind of character guy. I'd much take a good, satisfying bit of character development over a big kind of set piece scene any day. And I admired the balls of the choice as well, but I will give you a heads up because I imagine it'll rankle for some. But I don't care if this story has been fully told. And I think a lot of people are the same here. I absolutely need a season two of this. You cannot just make the best show on TV, put together one of the best casts ever assembled, and build out this world so perfectly, and then just walk away after one series. But if that is what they're doing, then what a fucking series. Shogun, all episodes are available on Disney Plus now. Check it out. It's incredible. Let's move on anyway to Amazon Prime, and I want to talk about Fallout, which is a video game adaptation of the series of the same name that's been around since the 90s. So a lot of expectations from a lot of hardcore gamers going into this. And first impressions from me was that it's a bit like if you watched Apple TV's Silo last year, it's like a more upbeat version of that, which with a touch of Don't Worry Darling as well. Don't worry, the good parts. Don't Worry Darling was a bit of a mess, but they had some interesting ideas, and they kind of take those interesting ideas and use it here. The casting for this is really on point. It's a bit of an Invincible vibe with Walton Goggins playing Cooper Howard, and you have Ella Purnell as lead Lucy McLean, while you have Aaron Moten is excellent as kind of the hapless wannabe badass Maximus, and there are some incredible cameos that I won't spoil along the way here too. But there's some like, I can't believe they got that person, both from a really famous standpoint, but also really niche standpoint too. It's attempting obviously to follow the lead of The Last of Us, being an adaptation of a much loved video game, but it very much goes its own way. Like The Last of Us, it starts with a really excellent apocalyptic cold open, which I love. An apocalyptic cold open. If you open with the world ending, you have me straight away. That's just me. But then once the opening credits hit, there's a complete tone shift to a more fun, kind of wacky vibe that's not afraid to get laughs either. I've never actually played the games myself, but I imagine it serves that audience really well, just watching it and kind of getting the vibe of it. It never apologizes or tries to over explain or make the content appealing or dumb it down for a mainstream audience. People like me who haven't played the game, we're all just thrown in and have to just go along with it, which is really ballsy TV making that I hope pays off for them. Jonathan Nolan, brother obviously of Christopher, directs the first three and serves as executive producer alongside wife and longtime collaborator Lisa Joy. And the pair's follow up to Westworld, which again kind of ended up flopping on HBO despite showing a lot of promise. But the show also has a comedic DNA with showrunners Graham Wagner, who worked on the likes of The Office and Silicon Valley. And then you have Geneva Robinson Dworet, who worked on Captain Marvel, which really suits Nolan and make his talents of putting on big showpieces more accessible, where Westworld kind of lost people by being a bit too high concept and setting a really good table, but then not being able to live up to expectations with the resulting meal. And a large part of what didn't work with Westworld was it wasn't fun. The characters weren't likable. You didn't get any laughs. There was no kind of break from the bleakness of it all. And that's what this show has in spades. So it really works. And you can see a lot of the Westworld DNA, though, in this through the likes of Goggins' character as the ghoul. And for all of Westworld's flaws, you had Ed Harris remain a permanent highlight, kind of befitting its primetime HBO status. So if I'm comparing kind of the ghoul to kind of the Man in Black, then that's a high comparison, and that's a kind of really positive thing there. So you have elements of that in here, but you also have a really fun goofball comedy that can also pull on dramatic strings too. The plot is kind of long and raveled, and it's in no rush whatsoever to unravel itself. Like I said, I've never played the games, but you can kind of see the RPG roots in the sheer amount of different layers to it that clearly have a wealth of backstory. It's kind of like if we go down that lane, we're going to have a completely different story. Whereas if we turn right, then that's going to go another way. And again, the show just kind of leaves a lot of that on the table, with fans getting to kind of fill in the blanks ourselves and non-fans having enough to be dealing with to not actually need more. And really, the only aspect of the story that I found myself wanting more of and kind of lacking in was the brotherhood aspect that felt a bit underserved, but everything else they really hit. That all sets up an absolutely thrilling, if really exposition heavy finale, which clicks everything into place nicely and sets up season two. You have it's directed by Wayne Yip, who's kind of paid his dues at Amazon Prime, working on the likes of Rings of Power, and you really pay your dues when you've worked on the Wheel of Time, because that show just did not work. But then he gets to finally craft his masterpiece with this one, and everything clicks together. Fallout is a really nice treat from Amazon. The jolt in the arm for them, just as Invincible, had a bit of a stumble with season two, as we covered earlier on the show. And the new trailer for The Boys makes it look like that's heading towards a conclusion in the next couple of series. So this seems like a good bit of IP to get them out of the blocks and to kind of keep them ticking over. And really, really recommend it. It's very, very good. Last up, I want to touch on new Netflix series Ripley, with Andrew Scott having his crack at being the talented Mr. Ripley, which is obviously adapting Patricia Highsmith's 1955 novel. The story follows a lowly workaday fraudster living in squalor in Queens, who gets asked by a business owner to go find an acquaintance who's gone AWOL in Italy. It's directed by and written by Steven Zalian, who has a really, really amazing CV that should get you interested in this. He created The Night Of, which is a great underrated HBO miniseries that doesn't get spoken about enough. And he also, by the way, wrote Schindler's List and The Irishman, among others. Zalian Zalian opts not to do a modern reboot or kind of mess with a broken formula here, and instead kind of leans really into the 1950s setting, not only in terms of story, but in terms of tone and aesthetic as well. It's very old school in nature. Like the show is shot in black and white, though, like Schindler's List, there is a couple of like flourishes of color. But not only just the black and white aesthetic, it's got kind of a lurking mystery score and a really simple setup of a story that just lets you sit in the suspense for long periods of time. It's a very patient show, despite it just being 8 episodes. The role of Ripley is absolutely perfect for Andrew Scott. It's kind of a mysterious blank slate that he can slowly color in time as he takes us on that journey of self-discovery. Like as we meet Ripley, you're asking yourself, is he a good guy with some flexible morals, or is he a full-blown sociopath? And you get the answer for that. And if you know the story, I saw the Matt Damon movie, you know where this is going. But Ripley really takes you on each step of that journey, and the TV series style of it really suits this story as well. So much of the drama in the show happens inside Scott's head. The show reminds me a lot in a way of Breaking Bad or Better Call Saul in that way, as they kind of give time and space to let the tension live in what he's planning, and if those plans are going to go wrong and how other people can mess with those plans. And again, it is an absolute phenomenal performance. Between this and All of Us Strangers, Andrew Scott is on a hell of a run, and Ireland in particular needs to be celebrating him more, because he's showing us that he's one of the best actors on the planet lately. Zalian uses really kind of simple effects to build unbearable suspense. Like you have, for example, at one stage, the sound of an elevator just going up and down, and there's constant repetition there. Like even just stuff like the sound of people's footstep going across the floor, just as like again, it's very Hitchcockian. Like in Zalian's hands, kind of a squeak out of place or a door slammed too loudly is an instant threat that you're all too aware of. Well, throughout the series, we constantly see key tropes repeated, like Ripley having to nervously walk past police, and you're like, is this the time he's going to get caught? Is this the time he's going to get caught? And it really, really works. It's like I said, kind of if Alfred Hitchcock made Breaking Bad, you've got that kind of old school suspense techniques, but with an anti-hero that you're not sure if you actually want to get their comeuppance, or you're secretly rooting to get away with it all. And part of that is because I need to give a special mention to Dakota Johnson and Maurizio Lombardi, who play foils for Ripley throughout and seem to be the only people who aren't bought into his lies and gaslighting in a way that, again, just really makes the tension work. This is falling under the radar just because there are so many other good shows right now, but this is well worth your time, and it's quietly one of the best things you'll watch this year. That's Ripley, and of course it's Netflix, so all episodes were released in one. It's out now. Check it out. I really recommend it.